Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be discussing Gurdjieff and esotericism. I'll be discussing this with Joseph McKeaney, author of this book, Creating a Successful Relationship, which has a lot of Gurdjieff material in it. Hello Joe and welcome. And would you like to start with a brief description of Gurdjieff and his work?
Yes, Gurdjieff was a very interesting man. Even in his youth, he was not satisfied with all what he found in his environment, what he found around him in his life. He posed questions to prominent members of his community, the Archbishop of Kars, very senior members of the military in his environment, men of wisdom and knowledge in his area. And the surprising thing for Gurdjieff was that he found that actually none of these people who were supposed to know knew anything about what he wanted to find out about. So he went on a search, on a quest, and for him it was a very, very important, sacred quest. And he teamed up with other people to do this. And these people, some of whom were women, called themselves the Seekers After Truth. And they had a very, very serious mandate, and that was to seek out and find hidden knowledge, ancient knowledge of the earth, because they all reasoned and intuited that this knowledge must somewhere be extant or hidden on the surface of the earth in a physical and a very real form. So they all went in search of this knowledge, and they all traveled in different directions, spread out all over the Middle East and the Far East, looking for threads, connections to what they might find in terms of hidden schools, esoteric schools, men who could direct them to these schools, or organizations that could be connected to these secret schools. And ultimately, Gurdjieff and some of his friends made contact with the Sarmung monastery, which according to some of Gurdjieff's students was in the Hindu Kush in Afghanistan, in the Afghan mountains. And Gurdjieff was initiated into this ancient knowledge, this ancient esoteric knowledge, which later he brought to Europe and America. And Gurdjieff came back from this place, this monastery, this ashram of ancient knowledge, a very changed man with a very changed mandate to explain to Western people and to deliver this wisdom in an articulate and simple form to people in the West, which was his mission when he left the Sarmung Center in Afghanistan. And Gurdjieff distinguished the cardinal difference between esotericism and academia and science. He maintained that there was a very, very distinct difference, and modern people had lost the ability to discern between these two different, very different modalities, esotericism and academia and modern science. So I want to read to you a very interesting quote from Gurdjieff himself about truth and higher knowledge. And this really gets to the core of esotericism as opposed to our modern Western academia. So I'm going to read this quote to you from Gurdjieff himself, and it goes like this. Freedom leads to freedom. Those are the first words of truth. You do not know what is truth because you do not know what freedom is. All the truth that you know today is only truth in quotation marks. There is another truth, but it is not theoretical. It cannot be expressed in words. Only those who have realized it in themselves can understand that truth. So here Gurdjieff is talking about a wisdom and knowledge that comes from ancient times through an unbroken line of schools and initiates to the present time, a knowledge and a wisdom that has the power to change being in a human being, to change our consciousness, to change our will, to change our vision, to change our cognitive level. And I will come back to this in a moment about cognitive level because it's really, really important. In the modern day times, we don't understand that cognitive level and intellectual capacity can be very, very different. We think that they are equal and they are the same, but they are not.
Why is esotericism misunderstood today?
Okay, in my mind, there are 4 reasons why esotericism is misunderstood today. And the first reason is directly connected with what the Gnostics call the 3 minds. And the three minds is very, very important, but is not at all understood by contemporary people. So let me describe the three minds to you and how important it is and how it's connected with understanding esotericism and also, of course, misunderstanding esotericism. So the first mind, there are three levels. The first level of mind is the intellectual mind. And the intellectual mind only understands that which has proof, only understands scientific argument, only understands opposites. And it's very limited. The intellectual mind is very limited. The academic mind is very limited in its remit, in its depth, and its breadth of examining facts and examining the big picture, the total equation. So that's the first level of thinking, and it's called the intellectual mind. Now, the second level is very interesting. It's called the emotional mind. And the emotional mind, people with an emotional mind tend to be interested in religion, cults, or sects. They tend to be interested in belief systems. And so we have the second mind, which is called the emotional mind. And this is very, very prevalent throughout society, and we can find this everywhere in religions and various different groups. But the third mind is the most important, and it's called the inner mind. So the inner mind is not happy and doesn't accept the reasoning of the first two minds, the intellectual mind or the emotional mind, because the inner mind utilizes three centers. It utilizes the moving center, the intellectual center, and the emotional center as one unit, as one triad, one functioning triad, to look at facts, to look deeper into the big picture of the question at hand. And so the inner mind is really a different level, a different cognitive level in man. But all modern people essentially have this ability, but it seems that in most people it is dormant. It's not being used because most people are of an intellectual bent, or they are of an emotional bent. They're interested in art or music. But the key is that we put all three chakras working in together in unison, and that gives us a different level, different cognitive level than the intellectual mind or the emotional mind by itself. Now, the second reason why esotericism is not understood, in my opinion, is that in academia today, all knowledge is lumped together as one unit, as one item. There is no differentiation between the different types of knowledge on this earth. Everything is seen as simply knowledge, academic knowledge or scientific knowledge. So there's no distinction between higher knowledge or academia. There is no discrimination. There's only, in people's minds, one type of knowledge, and people cannot see that there is a higher type of knowledge on this planet. And this is connected to the third part of what I'm going to present. And the third part is about how modern education produces this condition in people, the non-ability to differentiate between the different levels of knowledge. And I'm going to read this to you directly because it's very, very important. I want to be accurate on this. Modern education misrepresents esotericism and steers people away from its study and application to their lives. This is really important. This is actually, there's a thread of this going through all of modern education. Esotericism is portrayed as a pseudoscience, and modern mechanistic science is given a cult status in schools, colleges, and universities. And of course, this is done very, very subtly. This is not overt, it's very, very covert. Young people are brainwashed by this system into thinking that modern science is the ultimate discipline and the only way forward. If a student questions this, they are frowned upon, ridiculed, and marginalized by their teachers or their professors. In schools and universities, there is an unwritten code or an unspoken understanding in place that one does not question the status quo. One does not question the authority or authenticity of what is being taught, i.e. the subject matter and its veracity. This is how the system brainwashes people students are living in fear. They're afraid of any deviation from the norm or accepted norms in a college or university. And they're afraid that the university will destroy their chances that they may have in getting a pass or getting the grades they need if they deviate from the set curriculum. There is a culture of fear in most higher universities and most colleges. Esotericism is conflated with the occult and black magic. This impression of the esoteric being somehow dark and sinister is inculcated subtly into young people via the system we inhabit. Added to this, if somehow a person sees through this gambit for what it is, then the next strategy by those in position of authority is to give the impression that esotericism is a pseudo-discipline, a fake modality, which only those who have weak minds look into and study in a serious fashion. It is something for foolish people. Now, I have to tell you that esotericism is not a foolish modality, having studied the subject profoundly and in depth for over 30 years. Esotericism is a very profound, very deep, and very interesting subject for the intelligent mind.
How does one come to know about esotericism?
Although contemporary people are unaware of esotericism, there are three definitive influences in life, but ordinary people who have passed through the brainwashing system of education are only aware of the first one. And the first level of influence is called A influences in Gurdjieff's teaching. And those are the influences that we meet with in ordinary life. Science, academia, art, engineering, design, all of these things that we meet with in contemporary life, religions, cults. So all of these are A influences. And contemporary education only gives us A influences. It very rarely gives us what's called B influences. And the B influences are fragments of esoteric knowledge found scattered in society. That would be books by perhaps students of Gurdjieff and other esoteric teachers. Now, these are frowned upon by modern education and by contemporary science and contemporary academia. But these books and this material are vital. They are a vital source of higher learning, higher knowledge, and more profound insight than our contemporary philosophy and our contemporary psychology or academia. And then we have what's called C influences, which are even more interesting, but we rarely make contact with C influences in life because C influences are the direct contact with esoteric schools or people on a very high level spiritually who are products of esoteric schools. So our contact with C influences is very, very limited. One could say that Gurdjieff's students made contact with C influences when they met him because he was a direct product of a school in the East. And so he represented a C influence for them at that particular time. Esoteric knowledge essentially relates to the possibilities inherent in man's inner makeup. Those potentialities are not recognized in contemporary times and are not understood by science or academia. So all of man's inner possibilities for higher being, for higher development, for higher consciousness is not even recognized or accepted by contemporary science, contemporary academia, modern education, and mostly not even by modern psychology. So we have a situation where the whole system that we live in denies that man has very real spiritual potential or spiritual potentialities. One must begin to distinguish between two types of knowledge existing all around us. Most people do not, but essentially lump all knowledge to one category. Both sacred and profane are indistinguishable. Now, I want to read you this very, very powerful and really underestimated quote from Gurdjieff, but it is written down in materials of William Patrick Patterson from America. And it goes like this. It explains the difference between higher knowledge and ordinary knowledge in life. Every real religion consists of two parts. The first part teaches what has to be done. This becomes common knowledge. But in the course of time, it is distorted and departs from the original. The second part teaches how to do what the first part teaches. This second part is preserved in secret in certain schools. With its help, it is always possible to rectify what has been distorted or to restore what has been forgotten. So what Gurdjieff is saying here is that all of the major religions have an esoteric part. So we have esoteric Buddhism, we have esoteric Christianity. We have, in the Hindu religion, we have an esoteric part also. But in our contemporary times, this is not recognized. Only the external part of religion is understood by modern people, contemporary people. But the inner part of each religion is the most important. It contains knowledge of how to develop ourselves into higher being. Now, a good example of esoteric knowledge is that of the materials brought to us by Gurdjieff and his protege, Peter Damianovich Ouspensky. Another example which people can reference is the Egyptian pyramids and the discovery of the Bosnian pyramids. The Bosnian pyramids were discovered by Sam Osmanagic in 2006. He's a professor of anthropology and archaeology at the American University of Sarajevo in Bosnia. And so we have the Egyptian pyramids and we have the Bosnian pyramids. And today, for example, the Egyptian pyramids have been walled off by the Egyptian authorities. And you cannot enter and do scientific experiments within the band of peace, that is within this wall that surrounds the pyramids, without explicit permission from the Egyptian Department of Antiquities, which, by the way, you won't get. It's very rare that people now get permission to do any kind of experimentation with the pyramids or any measurements or any looking very deep, much deeper at these major archaeological buildings. And then we have the second lot of pyramids which have been recently found in Bosnia. And they are really important because there are tunnels and healing chambers in these pyramids which show that they had in ancient times healing modalities, and they had a knowledge which we have lost. And I repeat, they have had a knowledge of healing modalities and techniques that we have lost using sand and various other energies, subtle energies. And yet, the authorities all over Europe today do not wish that this discovery gets out. They are at the moment keeping a lid on the Bosnian pyramids and the tunnels, keeping a lid on all of the very important discoveries that are happening there with Sam and his team. And also in different parts of the world, there are other discoveries which are also being kept quiet and are not being discussed in the media or in newspapers. But my opinion is that this will change because these discoveries are so major, so profound and so important that Sam Osmanagic states that the scientific paradigm is about to change. And basically a lot of our universities today are teaching science that will be passé in a very short period, especially when all of this knowledge comes out from the pyramids and all of the modalities that they had access to in ancient times, which we have lost.
What are the esoteric teachings of Gurdjieff?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question because there are three main pillars. I mean, there are obviously more, but there are three main pillars of what Gurdjieff teaches. And the first pillar of what Gurdjieff teaches is called esoteric psychology. And the second is esoteric cosmology. And the third, esoteric alchemy. So perhaps we should start with esoteric psychology today and talk a little bit about that. If we look at what Gurdjieff teaches, he tells us that man's psychology is broken up into three elements. And these three elements are, in the beginning, for people who are not familiar with it, they have to work a little bit to understand the meaning of these three things. But essentially, they are not complex. They are very straightforward. So the three elements of man's psychology are essence, personality, and the false ego. But let's start with essence and personality. This is the cardinal elements of esoteric psychology. So essence is what a person is born with. what they come into life with. It is essentially theirs. It is not false. It is not something that is produced by life. It's, if you like, a tabula rasa. It's a blank canvas, but it has substance and it has meaning. It has depth. And the second part, personality, is the opposite. It's something that's created in the person via societal forces. And the third part is that part of personality which could be described as the pernicious element that can develop in our personality. That is the false ego. And the false ego seems to become more and more developed in contemporary people for some strange reason. The false ego is really the saboteur in a person. The part of a personality that sabotages the person himself or herself, and also sabotages other people in the course of their lives. So the false ego is, as Gurdjieff explains, has to be removed from our psychology. This is really, really important. So if we have problems with other people in society today, in contemporary times, really, most of the time it's because of this false ego. If we have problems communicating with people, quite often it's because of the false ego. It can be our own false ego, and it can, on other occasions, it can be the other person's false ego. But the false ego makes everything more difficult for people in terms of communication, in terms of expression of how we feel, how we truly feel, and also in terms of lying, because the false ego is an expert liar. The false ego lies continuously. So if we work on false ego, we have to work on lying. That's the core backbone of this false ego. And so I want to read this quotation from Gurdjieff again, and it's connected with man's and woman's potentialities in life, and it's also connected to this esoteric psychology. So I'm going to read this really special quote from Gurdjieff. Man's obligation is to cooperate with the laws which operate the universe. Because man has a unique place, the obligation goes with that. The awareness of your place is not a gift of nature. You must find it by conscious effort, not by hope. Man has a potentiality he knows nothing about. This forms the science of ancient times. We have lost all idea of these potentialities. So just to clarify on essence, personality, and the false ego, Gurdjieff explains to us that the way forward is to destroy false personality in ourselves and to develop essence, whilst at the same time reducing the power of personality. So this is a reversal. We have to reverse, because in modern day times, people, their personality is very strong. Their personality is the cardinal force in their psychology. And remember, personality is simply a product of our environment. It's a product, it's a societal construct. It doesn't have any substance, it's not real, but it does help us navigate life. In that sense, it's important, so we don't destroy it. So we render personality somewhat passive, and we accentuate or develop essence. So we can say that we put personality as a backseat passenger, and we put essence in the driving seat. And this is really important. The more we develop essence, the more our cognitive level increases. And the more we put personality in as a backseat passenger, the more we become stable in our core internally. We fear less, we are less stressed, we are more aware, our communication is more positive, and there are quite a line of positive things that happen when we develop essence and render personality passive. So this is really important. It's a really important part of Gurdjieff's teaching. And here's another quote which I'm going to read to you, which is very important in relation to essence, personality, and the false ego. Essence feeds on truth and can only grow and mature through the reception of truth. Personality feeds on half-truths and complex lies. The false ego feeds on lies, fantasy, arguments, prejudice, and negativity. It also feeds on the trite approval of others and shallow accolades. And I'll read you one more quote, which is very striking, from Maurice Nicole, who was a student of Gurdjieff. And this is technically a very, very powerful quote, because it gets to the core of personality and what it really means and how it robs us of many things in life. Personality developed according to your center of gravity will mislead and not give you the force and meaning you are seeking for. It will not give you substance and meaning for your life. So here Maurice Nicole gets to the core of how personality is not substantive enough to give us reality and meaning to our lives. Instead, it gives us a lot of false hopes. It gives us a lot of societal aims, but not real aims. And essence has to be nourished in a certain way. Personality can be nourished from schools, colleges, newspapers, magazines, what we see on TV and on the internet. So this all nourishes, strengthens personality. But remember, personality is the false, the mask that we all hide behind. So all the media and all of what we see in society, including the universities, colleges, and all the schools, they strengthen our personality. But essence needs something different. Essence cannot be strengthened by these energies, by these impressions, by these modalities. Something different is needed in the psyche of man to develop the essence. And again, Maurice Nicole has an amazing quote. I'm reading you these quotes because they're very powerful. He has an amazing quote which demonstrates this exact principle. I'm going to read this quote. Now, essence ceases to grow because it has not the right food for life, from life, to grow by. Life can provide food for the development of personality, but not food necessary for the development of essence. The secret is that personality and essence need different foods for their receptive development. They need different kinds of truth. For example, the education of personality is developed by knowledge of science, but essence is not developed by truths of this kind. So, Maurice Nicole here is clearly showing us that personality is developed by all kinds of societal forces and education, etc., etc. But essence cannot be developed in this way. But Gurdjieff explains to us that essence can be developed by the reception and use of esoteric wisdom. That is, if we absorb and study actively, I'm not talking about passive study like we do a magazine or a novel, but if we absorb and study esoteric wisdom actively, then we strengthen our essence. We strengthen and we start to grow qualities such as sincerity, humility, tenacity, courage, sensitivity. All of these qualities are necessary as building blocks for higher development in man. And so, if we think we can bypass this level of development, of integrity, etc., and qualities, it's not possible to do this. We have to develop these qualities first and foremost, and develop awareness, and develop the awareness of esoteric teachings, ancient wisdom that existed on this earth millennia ago, thousands and thousands of years ago, and was used to build pyramids, structures that we cannot even replicate today, and structures for which we do not know the purpose. Modern scientists and engineers do not even know the purpose of these buildings, these huge sacred structures. But these sacred structures have been known to esotericism for a very long time, and their purpose has been known.